Welcome to Wait What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGhee, the podcast where we take a sometimes irreverent, sometimes cynical, and yes, even a sometimes serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, Tim McGhee.
And I'm David Parro.
David, what's on your mind?
You just jump right off. You go right at it, ask the question because you want to get to it. I can tell you want to talk about things today. So I want to start because
how are you, David? How's your time out? How's your time out on the east end of Long Island? Are you enjoying the lovely weather?
It's incredible weather we're having out here. Well, it's incredible weather anywhere, I think. It just seems amazing.
Is that what
for this time of fall?
Well, there was a F5 tornado in Minnesota, which not first.
Sorry.
Yeah, so it's not great weather everywhere, but this is what we've been reduced to. This friendship has been reduced to talking about the weather.
Nah. So I want to start with one of the subjects we've taken up the last couple episodes because it is important and it's evolving and it's at a very, very critical time, and that's what's going on in the WNBA. A'ja Wilson performing great again as the Aces have taken a 2-0 lead against the Phoenix Mercury in the WNBA finals. And there's so many great things that have happened with the WNBA this year, even with Caitlin Clark being out with injury so many times. Their numbers were terrific. Their attendance was record. ESPN numbers averaging 1.3 million viewers per game is what I understand. League's revenue, according to Deloitte, to surpass $1 billion. So all of these very positive things going on with the league. Yet we are in a situation where one of the star players, first of all, to set up, obviously in a not advancing labor discussion, not advancing CBA discussion between the Players Association and one of its star players, Napheesa Collier, has ignited a further firestorm by coming out and talking about, and we mentioned this last week, ripping deeply into Commissioner Cathy Engelbert and talking about the lack of leadership in the league. And then everybody, top players, as far as I know, every player that's commented on this supporting Fee, as she's known, and what she said about league leadership. Cathy Engelbert finally came out and made a statement. She denies everything that Napheesa Collier has said she said. And there were rumors that she was going to step down. She said she's not a quitter. She's not going to step down. But as you and I have discussed this both on air and off, that it's going to be hard for Engelbert to survive this because there is no trust with the players right now, and that seems very, very obvious. So we have a situation where a league, the W, has achieved its greatest numbers ever. It finally seems to be at that point where it is, the valuations are up, a new television deal in place, the play is getting a lot better. The fan situation obviously is solid, yet they have this very severe labor disagreement. I don't see, and I believe you concur with that they're not going to be able to get a CBA in place, a new one, before this current one expires at the end of October. That means work stoppage, and they're not going to be able to get a new commissioner in place at that time. And there is talk about the players basically or possibly deciding not even to negotiate at this point until the W puts another commissioner in place or elects a new commissioner. And who knows? That, by the way, if that does happen, that's going to be one of the most hotly sought after sports executive positions going. But I'll turn it over to you at this point because it's a pretty complex story and a very juicy one.
Where the league is in its development and where the CBA is, I think what the players have done is they've taken the focus off what should be, in my opinion, the most important aspect of this CBA discussion, which is what percentage of league revenue should be shared with the players. So the NBA players get 51% of basketball-related revenue. The WNBA players get 7%. Clearly, there's a great disparity there. I don't necessarily think you bridge the entire gap in one CBA. But there has to be something done to give those players higher salaries and higher salary cap in the form of percentage of revenue that's shared. But all of that has taken a back seat to the she said between Napheesa Collier and Cathy Engelbert, and Cathy Engelbert's already been, dead and buried, killed and buried as the commissioner. Now, I don't think she survives to be the commissioner going into next year, but I think if you are the league, you are ceding incredible power to the players by saying, okay, you don't want to negotiate with her, we'll put somebody there and play. Who are you going to put in there, right? Yeah, I think, you said that. The other thing is, where are the owners having the back of this commissioner, at least for now, to say, this is who is going to be negotiating, this is going to be at the table on our behalf negotiating this renewed collective bargaining agreement, and we are serious about getting this deal done. And any discussion about who will be the next commissioner, we won't even broach until we come to an agreement on the new CBA. We owe it to the players. We owe it to ourselves as owners. We owe it to the fans. We owe it to our media partners, our sponsors. We owe it to every stakeholder who's got skin in the game.
Yeah, I've been a little torn on that piece because I agree with you that it's seemingly that she's been left dangling on this situation. Adam Silver, the NBA does own 42% of the WNBA, so a significant amount, and he came out and spoke, but didn't really take any sides on this other than, fully supportive of the direction that the WNBA has been going. So yeah, I think it's a really tough situation here, for sure. And no one is suggesting that the players aren't going to get a significantly higher percentage of the total revenue, right? I don't think that's been said at all. And yes, that's where negotiations come in. I haven't had that much of a problem with their position to date, making sure that it is a significant bump in this. Obviously, there are these other interesting factors involved. You've been great about bringing these up over the last couple episodes, and that's specifically not only Napheesa Collier's role on the board of the Players Association. She's one of the top people on that, and she's certainly one of the most well-respected voices among players, but she is one of the founders of Unrivaled Basketball, and her husband's the president of that entity. Unrivaled has largely to date been a league that gives players another avenue, another chance to make money in a 3-on-3 format, a different format altogether. Who's to say what that could become? So that it really is a messy situation, which of course is why I find the whole story very interesting.
The question is, who benefits most, if at all, from a work stoppage? And the answer is Unrivaled. And so we've had this conversation before.
Well, but that to me is if Unrivaled is to become the new WNBA, or was it... Listen, I really think Napheesa Collier needs to come out and make a pretty broad statement. She just canceled her meeting that she was supposed to have with Cathy Engelbert, saying that, following Cathy Engelbert's, basically addressing the press on this issue, she goes, well, she can't be accountable for what she said. She's calling me a liar, and therefore I'm not going to meet with her. Well, this is obviously just getting nastier and nastier, of course. But I think she should publicly address that situation because it's a logical question. Because the WNBA, in a perfect world, right, is the league. It is the league, and having these other, offshoot programs such as Unrivaled, or for that matter, Athletes Unlimited Basketball, which is another program that women players in the WNBA had a chance to play in the United States and make some extra money, especially while they weren't getting paid all that well under their WNBA contracts.
Again, I said earlier, it's a she said, she said. Did Cathy Engelbert call Napheesa Collier a liar? No, she did not use the term liar.
Correct.
Now, is there a possibility that Collier heard something that was different from what Engelbert said, or was interpreted in a way that was different than Engelbert meant it? Yes, absolutely. And how do you resolve that? By speaking to one another. If this is a negotiating tactic, which it is, let's be honest, it's very heavy-handed. In my opinion, and I am as pro-labor as you can get. Right? I'm one of those weird wobbly guys. I would have voted for Eugene Debs for president back in the early 20th century if I were around. I mean, that's how pro-labor I am. But I go back, and I've mentioned this before. When Major League Soccer was going through a similar situation about 20 years ago, Kathy Carter, who was at the league at that point, said they're negotiating a contract that's probably 2 deals before it should be. Meaning you can't get everything in the next deal. You sometimes have to leave room for growth on both sides. I get the sense that that's what the players are doing.
Yeah, listen, I think the times are a little different now, and if there was ever a time for the players to be aggressive in their negotiating, it's now, because they have the valuations to prove it, the genuine enthusiasm around the game to prove it. Have you watched any of the games from the first 2 games from Las Vegas?
Yes.
In the play, I mean, the atmosphere is unbelievable.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about this is whenever there's labor strife between owners and players, you always read or hear, well, it's just millionaires against billionaires, and who cares? And there's very little sympathy towards either side. That's clearly not the case now.
Correct.
Where your highest salary is in the low to mid six figures. So that's not the case. I would just hate to see the players spoil the goodwill that they have. And I think they do need to be careful. I do think that they need to employ a PR agency to make sure that they continue to position themselves and present themselves, because they do have a strong case. You're right. But once games are lost, then all bets are off in terms of who sides with whom, I think. And yes, we aren't even done with the CBA. It goes through October 31st. I think it's safe to assume that there will be no deal between now and October 31st. But then the question becomes, what happens? Do they continue to negotiate? Do the players strike? Do the owners lock them out? What do you gain by taking that step when no games are at risk of being lost for another, what would that be, 7 months?
This is guaranteed to be something we will be talking about during shows in November, which, think about that a year or 2 ago, if we would have been talking about WNBA as significantly as we have been this year, but now with this story. And there are just a lot of really fascinating ends of this thing to me. And the players are going to have to continue to speak out. And, Breanna Stewart's going to get, as another one of the founders from Unrivaled, is going to have to speak. I mean, they were out of the playoffs earlier than they hoped this year, defending champion New York Liberty. But these are people that are going to have to talk, and they're going to be in front of the press, having to discuss what all this means at a time when the sports press and the sports business press wasn't focusing all that much attention on the WNBA. So from that standpoint, they're in the news. You have more to say on this? Let's hash it out.
I've got about 14 other things I would love to hit on.
Right.
Let's go. So, yeah, I'd like to talk about what I think is the strangest story in sports from the last week, namely the situation with Mark Sanchez. For those of you who didn't read about it, Mark Sanchez, former New York Jets quarterback, by the way, the last quarterback to get him to an AFC championship game, and now Fox Sports commentator, was hospitalized overnight, Saturday night in Indianapolis. We woke up to see reports that he was, in some reports, in critical condition from a stab wounds that he incurred. And, at first there was a lot of speculation about what happened. So Sanchez went full Karen. He apparently accosted this driver, told him he wasn't allowed to park where he was parked. The guy was picking up industrial grease from a restaurant. He then tried to gain entry into the truck driver's cab, at which point the truck driver claimed that he felt threatened. Pepper sprayed Mark Sanchez, which apparently had no effect on Sanchez. He continued to attack him. And then at which point the truck driver stabbed Sanchez multiple times, but the truck driver was hurt. We were talking about it before we came on the air. All indications from video evidence and people who might have seen some of it was that Mark Sanchez very much was the aggressor. So after being originally charged with some misdemeanors, now he's being charged with a felony, which could land him in prison up to 6 years. But wait, there's more before you call an order. Now the truck driver is suing Mark Sanchez and Fox Sports, which I find that last bit a little ridiculous, but here we are.
Yeah, I think when people find out the situation with a celebrity, they're gonna cast the net as wide as they can to see where it could land. It helps them on the settlement front, etc. I'd forgotten that Sanchez was the last quarterback to lead the Jets to an AFC championship game. He did it twice, yet he still remembered, at least before this incident, more for the butt fumble than he is for those for getting the Jets to close to the promised land. You're right. The first thing we heard that Mark Sanchez was stabbed, and then all this stuff coming out. Now I don't mean to make light of this because it is a business story because of the Fox being sued on this, or Fox Sports being sued on this. I'm not sure how the filing had progressed on this, but. You said that the truck driver, the grease truck driver, did he have pepper spray with him? So he pepper sprayed Sanchez or tried to pepper spray Sanchez? That just shows you how tough people that play the quarterback position in New York must be. He didn't even get affected by. I think I would go down quickly with a little pepper spray.
That's my understanding. Now, my first question is, did he check the expiration date on the pepper spray? Because everything I've seen with people who get pepper sprayed,
it's
not fun. Listen, I think there's a bigger issue here. Apparently, this truck driver was seriously injured, which is terrible and never should have happened. You also have to wonder, because apparently Sanchez said in the hospital he had no recollection of what happened. So was he in a blackout? Which raises a whole bunch of other questions about abusing alcohol, and I'm not gonna, venture a guess on whether he does or does not have an issue with alcohol. But I think there's a lot more to be said about that. But there's a lot of, when you get beyond the sort of jokes that write themselves, there's a lot of serious stuff that went on in this incident.
Yeah, and it is partly because you're being a fan of the Jets, the fact that the Jets are everything that they tend to, it's just like all the unbelievable things happen to the Jets. Like no other team had.
But he went on and played for other teams after he left the Jets. I don't know why. He is most associated with the Jets. And the Onion even came out with a headline that said Sanchez's punishment should be 5 more years with the Jets.
I'm not knocking you or your fandom of the Jets. I respect the fact that you're a fan of the
I have given
Jets.
up on them for this year.
Well, for this year, but you'll be back, and I totally respect that. So there are all these funny things, but you're right; it's a serious aspect, and I think that just to go back to the issue of the lawsuit being filed or the suing of Fox and of Mark Sanchez is, from what I understand, is that the victim in this situation is saying that Fox should have known that this guy had an alcohol problem. He shouldn't be out in public like that. I don't know. So some lawyer is doing something there in terms of investigation. But yeah, it all seems like they're going to sue whoever they sue. Everybody, as the Jerky Boys would say. Yeah,
they sue the deep pockets. I don't think that.
Yeah, because I only consider this half of a sports business story, I'm going to give you, because I just decided I could do that, I'm going to give you the next big topic to take on.
Oh, you've deemed yourself the commissioner of Wait Why.
At least of this episode.
What's next? A couple of more sort of traditional business things. Two very positive. One sort of like, whoa, what's going on here? ESPN wildcard ratings up 64% from last year, average 4.6 million viewers, 7.4 million for the Yankees-Red Sox series.
Yeah.
I wonder if Jimmy Pitaro is sitting there questioning his decision to get out of that deal.
Yeah, I felt like it had a chance to be a big number, so not totally surprised. Things were lining up nicely.
Yeah, and then other news, NBC Universal reporting that they're virtually sold out of all their NBA ad inventory for the upcoming season.
Good start.
Tell me about it. And Mark Lazarus looking pretty smart for going all in to get that package, and kudos to his brother Peter, who leads the sales efforts for NBC Sports. I mean, unbelievable. Yeah. So those are two really big, positive stories. But there's also a topic that we have talked about many times on this show, LIV Golf. Recently reported that its non-U.S. operations lost $462 million last year and has lost a total of $1.1 billion since 2021. Now, we've had this discussion. First of all, that's non-U.S. operation. We don't know how the U.S. operations have performed. I can't imagine they've done much better.
You have to think that it's pretty representative, right? Like you can extrapolate that out is the way I was looking at that.
Right. And then, we've had this conversation many times before. When LIV Golf first came out, the conventional wisdom was that the tour needed LIV a lot more than LIV needed the tour. That certainly doesn't seem to be the case anymore, number one. And number two, again, the PIF, right, the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia, could fund this thing indefinitely. But at the end of the day, they're an investment fund and they expect to get a return on their investment. So how much are they willing to suffer in terms of losses before they pull the plug? Now, I would imagine that a lot of the guarantees that they've made, right, those deals have now expired and the players will have to make a decision whether or not they want to continue golfing with LIV. I wouldn't be surprised if many of them who are able, who are still playing at that level, go back to the PGA Tour. They've made generational wealth through this first deal with LIV. But I think like any other professional athlete, they want to play against the best competition week in and week out. And that's on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating week when these numbers got revealed at just how deep the losses have been. Now, my view on this continues to be exactly what it has been for the last year plus, and that is that PIF is still. I mean, obviously they want the seat. They want a massive seat at the table. I think their eyes are still more on the PGA Tour. And getting the piece that they thought they had on this before they kind of went, dove back in and invested even further into LIV. I heard a report from one of the SBJ reporters on this issue that was covering this story, and he talked about attending a LIV event and said that the atmosphere was great and that he doesn't see LIV going away. But that's only to your point about PIF could fund this thing indefinitely if they want to. They have good executives. They've just hired new executives into other positions beyond Scott O'Neill and Chris Hack. So they have the ability to go ahead and do this, but it still continues to be some degree of posturing. And there are two other pieces of this that I wanted to talk about. One, Greg Norman finally came out and did a statement. I made a joke about him being, finally saying he's left LIV, and we were going, what's he been doing? He hasn't been doing anything. But he came out and made some statements, and I've been pretty brutal on Greg Norman. But he came out and he said, he whined a little bit about how tough it was and that everybody was coming after him and that it was a rough year and that he worked hard. I'm not denying that he probably worked hard to make this thing work. But he did make a comment that he said, if nothing else, he'd like to be respected and acknowledged for having made things different on the PGA Tour. And he's right about that. What he pushed, and I'll even put Phil Mickelson in there on that, what they forced the PGA Tour to do was put more money into this to create new avenues of opportunity, both for newer players and the more successful, higher ranked players. So I think Greg Norman can take that. I think he went about it in a lot of difficult ways. He needed to move aside to give LIV any sort of chance of succeeding. But I think they continue to be an issue. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is this past week, we had another first-time winner on the PGA Tour, Stephen Fisk, who won the Sanderson Farms Championship this weekend. Have you ever heard of Stephen Fisk? I hadn't heard of Stephen Fisk.
I haven't heard of Sanderson Farms either.
He birdies 15, 16, and 17 to go on and win and upset, pull ahead of 𝗧𝗪𝗃𝗀. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I'm not sure. It was his 24th start on the PGA Tour. Now, I know that LIV established a few things to have people like younger players qualify or get involved, but you do not hear these stories on LIV. And even if the tour and the golf fans want the best players at the top of the leaderboard every weekend, these are the stories that still happen 4 or 5 times a year on the PGA Tour. That story's not going to happen in LIV Golf. And I think that's another angle that the PGA Tour has that makes it something that people want to follow on a more regular basis if you're a golf fan. I could be wrong on that. That may be my opinion. But that struck me in this whole story about LIV's continued losses and what's it going to mean, because the tour has the much bigger viewership, much better acceptance among the press and the core base of traditional golf fans, and it still has stories like this.
My question, and this is not a rhetorical question, what does LIV have to offer the PGA Tour now, other than unlimited funding to fund whatever initiatives Jay Monahan and Brian Rolapp would like to undertake? I don't think they bring anything right now.
Right. I think you and I have chatted about that. It's people that say we want to have the best players play. That's just a duh, of course. But that doesn't mean that LIV can survive exactly like it is. Listen, I think if there is going to be I hate even saying, because I don't think it's a merger, but if it's a reunification of some sort and PIF has a seat at the table on it, it is that there is a team competition, but it has to be lesser events, and it's still under the control of the tour. I don't think that even with PIF's money, given what the Strategic Sports Fund has been able to do with through Fenway Sports, I don't think they're sitting there sweating this right now. I mean, yeah, they'd like to have DeChambeau and Jon Rahm playing, and a couple of the other guys playing regularly. Those two guys are still at the top of their games. Who else do they need or want?
Yeah, and these players, this is not an indictment of these players who went over to LIV. This is a statement of fact. It's clear that they will go where there's the most money. And if LIV no longer offers these guarantees, they'll go back to the tour. They've demonstrated they'll go where the money is. So a lot of it's going to depend on what these renewal deals with these players look like. But again, if they only make them to a certain number of players, and those players, it's sort of like Peyton Manning on the schoolyard in that skit from Saturday Night Live where they're beating up on everybody else in the field. That's going to get old in a hurry for those guys.
Yeah. Yeah, they have up their prize money is unbelievable. It's bigger than a weekly PGA Tour event, so they do have that going for them. But at that point, the differential is minor. It really was those big sign-on bonuses or sign-on salaries, whatever you call it, for those top guys to come over and get the thing launched in the first place.
Yeah.
Hey, I'd like to do a spotlight on sponsorship, Tim. We haven't done that in a couple weeks.
How do we feel about these sponsorship deals?
There's one very significant deal that I think deserves our attention, and that's Starbucks signing on as a major partner on the local level with USOPC and LA28. And the reason I think this is an important one is because it is such a pervasive, omnipresent retail brand, Starbucks, that has the ability, and I think back to my days at McDonald's and what we were able to do with sponsorships just because of the amount of consumer facing we had, and Starbucks is very much like that. They're not only on every corner, they're on all four sides of corners across the U.S. and elsewhere around the world. So I think this is a huge win for LA28 and the USOPC. I think it can be a great one in terms of just the conversation building up to the games in 28. I wanted to talk about it because I'm very excited to see how it rolls out, when they're going to start, with their programming and activation from a retail level. And, these are the kind of things that I get excited about because it bodes well for the world of sponsorship. And I like it when sponsorships are highly visible. And I think this one is going to be.
Yeah, I think the potential benefit to the USOPC and LA 2028 go well beyond the tens of, if not hundreds of millions of dollars at Starbucks. Imagine having a tune-in message on every cup of Starbucks that's sold throughout the United States leading up to the games. It's unbelievable. I don't think Starbucks has done much in sponsorships, maybe some local Seattle-based deals. So this is a game changer. I've got a couple of spotlights on sponsorship, if you don't mind. First of all,
great.
My former employer, AT&T. recently announced a renewal
Yeah.
with the NCAA. So congratulations to Mark
Yep.
Wright, past guest, and his team there. That deal goes back, something like 25 years, back to the singular wireless days. I will say that was always one of the most challenging renewals I had to work on. I used to joke that during the renewals, I wished that I was the sponsorship guy at Hershey's, because I was reasonably certain that the definition of a candy bar would not have changed over the term of a 3-year deal. Whereas, how quickly the telecommunications space was changing from the beginning of the deal to the end of the deal made it very difficult to contemplate the category.
Were you doing that deal back when, I think, because I was doing the NFL deal for Hershey's back in the day, but I think Scotty Becker, our friend Scott Becker, was doing the NCAA deal. Is that right?
I didn't.
Because Hershey did have the deal. I love the fact that you referenced that.
I didn't come across Scott at that point, but I worked with somebody who's now I consider a good friend of mine, Devin Edwards, who's still at CBS, and what a class act he was. But those were always very challenging because of what we had to contemplate in terms of the category. And I can only imagine how much they're spending now, because I knew how much we were spending then. I also want to give a shout out to the Seattle Reign and my friend Courtney Carter, who's Chief Revenue Officer there. They just signed a new front of kit sponsor, pet insurance company called Trupanion. So I think this is, Terry Lefton could keep us honest here, but probably the first pet insurance major sponsorship that we've heard about. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff going on in the world of sponsorships.
Let's get her on down the road and onto the show. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think she'd be happy to come on.
All right, before we go to break, what else? One more big topic?
Do we want to talk about what's going on in the
world,
in this administration in Washington?
Well, if it intersects with the sports world, I guess we need to.
It most absolutely does. We have talked about President Trump being a huge sports fan, and him going to the Ryder Cup and going to U.S. Open tennis and UFC events. I do think that, and we have not been critical of that. Might have been critical of the USTA for the delays it caused fans getting in, but not critical of a sitting president going to a sporting event. I think that goes back to,
probably like Howard Taft.
Yeah, I was going to say Howard Taft throwing out the first pitch at a Senators game. But I do think that some recent developments, I think we need to shine a light on, and not in a positive way. I think there's, what am I looking at here? 1, 2, 3, 4 things in particular that this administration is doing or planning to do, which I think I think are deplorable, for lack of a better term. First of all, the State Department declining to grant visas to the Iranian delegation to come over for the selection for the FIFA World Cup. I think that's been one of the questions that people have had is the State Department going to deny visas to certain delegations or even teams coming over for the World Cup? And that's a big concern. And that goes 4 things. And that goes hand in hand with Trump's recent statement that he's going to change where the matches are being played if there's any hint of, potential danger in these cities. And he has no authority to do that. Yes, they could deny funds for security and so forth. But this is one of the few times where Infantino at FIFA has stood up to Trump and said, no, these agreements are between us and the host cities, and we alone are the ones who would make the determination as to whether those matches were moved, and they will not be moved. But the fact that he's inserting himself into that to score political points, I think it goes against the whole spirit of the tournament. It goes against the spirit of sports. And it's just him being a bully and trying to be a bully. So that's it. We talked about Bad Bunny last week. Now Kristi Noem, the head of Homeland Security, claims that God is on their side, and ICE will be out in force at the Super Bowl.
What does God have to do with it?
Nothing. God,
I mean, I'm just curious as to what on the side of getting, like ICE showing up in weird spots.
Well, I don't. To me, that's not even the most laughable part of this. The most laughable part of this, and that's very laughable, believe me. But does she really think that an undocumented immigrant working 2 jobs to provide for his family can afford to go to the Super Bowl? Like they're going to be hanging outside the stadium?
Yeah, I know there's probably a few more on the list, but we never set out to talk about politics for politics' sake on this show. But we've also never had an administration that injects itself into the world of sports and into the business side of sports as regularly as this one does. So I think we do have to talk about it. It certainly comes up. I mean, we're talking about the biggest event in the world coming to North America next year and all of these potential issues. And then with the Super Bowl, obviously we had a lot of fun last week talking about the people that seem to be up in arms about Bad Bunny performing because he speaks in Spanish. Yes, Tim.
I have my hand raised.
Yes, I'm acknowledging that.
𝗧𝗵𝗃, my very good friend from USA Luge, posted on my LinkedIn comment, which I thought was a brilliant point. Rolling Stones, not American. Who, not American. U2, not American. Where was the concern that these non-American acts were performing in the Super Bowl?
They had to dive into the language situation, and then from that you have congresswomen trying to create new laws that say only English can be spoken here. And listen, I love the Stones as much as anyone, but Mick Jagger doesn't speak a form of English that most Americans can readily understand either. I mean, it's all so crazy, and there are so many things going on. It's a little worrisome. And when you talked about, are there going to be visas not given? One of the most successful team, I think the most successful team in World Cup history is Brazil. Is that accurate? Would you say? I think they've won the most World Cups. Brazil is currently a country that is in the crosshairs of this administration. Newer administration of Brazil is not one that the U.S. administration is fond of, and there have been tariffs just on that basis added. So is that going to be something that comes up? So yeah, it's wild. We have to talk about this stuff.
Son idiota.
Man, Duolingo, so amazing.
Sí. Qué rico.
And we haven't even talked about UFC yet.
Oh my God, you talk about cheapening the presidency and cheapening the White House, the People's House. Having a UFC event on the south lawn of the White House to celebrate Trump's 80th birthday. Come on.
Yeah, it was. And for those of you that don't know about this story, it was originally going to be around the 250th
anniversary.
July
4th, which I could almost understand. But this is just absurd.
Yeah, but to move it to his 80th birthday. And listen, Dana White has said that UFC is going to foot the bill, the $700,000 bill to re-sod.
It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is it cheapens the presidency. It cheapens the White House, which is the people's house. It is not Trump's house. It is the people's house. And I just think it's disgusting.
Well, that's your opinion, obviously.
Yes, it is. And I'm sure there are people who disagree with me.
Well, I'm saying I don't think Trump agrees with that. But
what's he going to do? Have Brendan Carr come after us?
Maybe.
Bring it on.
Watch it. Oh, that would be great, by the way. That would boost our ratings.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt about it.
Even more so than Andy Clark posting about us.
All right. You got anything more on that? Did you hit all your points of 4? Did we get to all of them before we take a break?
I got my Irish up.
All right, nice job. All right, take a break. We're going to be right back. Back. It's that time of the show where we take a little peek ahead, see what's piquing our interest, random shout-outs, corrections, whatever else we have forgotten. Tim, tell me, what do you have your eye on?
Well, continuing to follow the Major League Baseball playoffs, it looks like some of these things might be 3 and done. Milwaukee's up 2-0 on Chicago. LA's up 2-0 on Philly. Toronto's up 2-0 on the Yankees. So we'll see if these teams can fight back and make these series competitive. I'll continue to watch that. Second, the James Franklin watch is on after losing to UCLA. Yeah. We'll
After just getting rid of their coach with a huge buyout. Yeah.
Yeah, so the watch continues there. And then I just have one quick shout out to the TikTok follower who commented on our piece that you put up talking about Bad Bunny and Danica Patrick. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, David. Called Danica Patrick the biggest DEI hire ever. So
thank you for all of our social media followers.
Yeah.
And glad you all had fun with that. By the way, I want to thank you for making the reference last week to Up With People as the radical splinter group, which just totally cracked me up. And
I've been sitting on that joke for years.
Yeah, but they 5 times they performed at halftime, and I will continue to say, as I said last week, if they were selected, there would be people absolutely with their heads exploded, giving kind of the that we didn't think about it necessarily in those terms back then, but the politics of today, I think people would go out of their mind anyway.
Yeah, well, I was going to make it a slightly less obscure reference. I mentioned Anita Bryant, who played the halftime show, the 1971 Super Bowl V.
She would get some massive backlash from the left. There's no doubt about that if she were, put up there right now.
Anti-woke. And I'm checking. Yeah. So she played, that was Super Bowl V. I want to say that was the one where Jim O'Brien kicked the winning field goal for the Colts.
Yeah. Could be.
Yeah.
I remember that one.
Yep.
Gosh, now we're doing a dating. All right, a couple shout outs. When we had Frank Vuno on a month or so ago, we talked about the roast that they were going to do of him. The date has been set, and we said that we were going to mention it. It's November 5th, 6 to 9 at MetLife Stadium in the Legacy Club there, New York Giants Legacy Club. For more information, go to givehmh.org/Vuno roast. That's VUONOROAST, and all for the benefit of Hackensack Meridian Health and what they're doing for kids' cancer, to tackle kids' cancer. So wanted to let our listeners know that. We mentioned Game Changers last week. We also have a past guest that was on this year's SBJ 40 Under 40. So big congratulations to Jerry Cifarelli Jr. on that. I also want to thank Keith Cutler for hosting us on Friday at his sports sponsorship class at Montclair State. That was wonderful for us to get together and be back in the classroom. A couple things I'm looking at. Obviously, NHL season starts this week. And the 2311 Front Row Motorsports NASCAR thing continues to bubble up. And NASCAR has filed a motion to force the court to put them at the table to try to get a settlement. NASCAR is using the other teams and the other teams' concern about this going on. And NASCAR is saying the other teams want this settled. That's a big leverage point. 2311 and Front Row are pushing back, saying that's what NASCAR does, is this kind of thing. So they're wanting it to continue in the way that it has. Listen, I hope they get to a settlement on this thing, because I don't want this to have to go to trial. But that's my view. But it's a pretty major thing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see it. And we talked before about how NASCAR seems to have the upper hand in this right now, but they're the ones calling for this settlement discussion.
They don't want that team, out. I think they obviously want them in the fold. So it's definitely a matter of who's feeling the leverage in this moment. From a legal standpoint, I totally see what NASCAR is trying to do. And they're just looking at this very, very differently right now. So, like I said, my hope is that this thing ends up getting settled before it goes to trial. But we have friends, particularly at 2311, and when this all started, they had a reasonable position on it. But we'll see how it shakes out. Again, this is just one of those stories, not dissimilar in a way. It's just a juicy story that's kind of came from a place that we didn't expect it as we headed into the year, and so we talk about it. So unless you got anything else, Tim, I think that's a wrap on episode 130.
Wow.
You know, we've proven to be pretty good with our predictions every year, but man, there's some just major stories that are emerging this year, as I just said, from kind of uncommon spots. And I, for one, and I think you are here for that. So with that, Tim, thank you for another great discussion. A lot of cool stuff going on, a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Like I said, that's kind of juicy. Thank mostly, obviously, to the listeners for spending any sort of time with us. It really does mean a lot. Hit those follows everywhere, whether it's Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube. And as always, you can find all of our content and links to it at dpandmcgee.com. So until next time, I'm DP, he's McGhee. We'll talk soon.